Una Park walked home the same way every evening. The city was always loud. Cars hissed on wet streets. Neon signs flickered, throwing colored light on puddles. She passed the mouth of a narrow alley between a noodle shop and a recycling depot. A warm, damp smell from a rusted steam drain pipe always hung there. For the past week, she had noticed a new piece of the alley's furniture. A young Ilari girl. She sat on an overturned plastic crate, always huddled close to the pipe's warmth. Her clothes were dirty human clothes, too big for her thin frame. Her hair was the real tragedy. All Ilari had hair like fine threads of glass or silk that could catch the light. This girl's hair was a massive, tangled knot. It looked like a dark, matted bird's nest, all its shine long gone. Her skin, which should have shown delicate patterns of soft light, was dull and smudged with city grime. Una was a hairstylist. She worked all day making hair neat, beautiful, and clean. Seeing that ruined hair every day felt like a small, persistent ache. But it was more than that. The girl's posture, the way she drew her knees to her chest, reminded Una of her little sister. Her sister had loved having her hair braided. Una would braid it while they watched cartoons. That was years ago, before the sickness took her. The memory was a quiet, heavy stone in Una's chest. She never stopped. She wasn't brave or foolish. She was just tired from work and carrying that old sadness. But one Tuesday, the rain was a cold drizzle. The girl was shivering. Una kept walking, but the image stayed with her all through her small, quiet dinner in her little apartment. The next evening, Una's old canvas work bag held something extra. A sealed protein bar from the salon stash and a simple, sturdy hairbrush with wide-spaced plastic teeth. She didn't plan a speech. She didn't even plan to stop. As she passed the alley, she simply slowed, took the items from her bag, and placed them on the dry end of a low bench near the alley's entrance. She didn't look at the girl. She just walked away, her heart beating a little fast. She felt silly. The girl would probably ignore it. The following day, Una almost didn't look. But as she crossed the street, her eyes flicked toward the bench. The protein bar was gone. The hairbrush was there, but it had been moved. It was placed neatly in the center of the bench, as if on display. And on its bristles, Una could see a few long, strange hairs. They were faintly shimmering, even in the dirty alley light. The girl had used it. A strange feeling, warm and nervous, settled in Una's stomach. This was a conversation, a silent one. That evening, she left 2 protein bars and a small bottle of water. The next day, they were gone, and the brush was again placed neatly on the bench. On the 3rd day, Una added a clean, folded hand towel. The day after that, a pair of warm socks. Each offering was accepted. The brush was always returned to the center of the bench. Una started to watch from the corner of her eye as she walked. The girl never took the items while Una was there. She would wait, a shadow in the deeper shadows, until Una turned the corner a week after she left the first item. The evening was clear and cold. Una's bag had the usual offering, food, water. But she also carried a new, soft-bristled brush and a few hair ties from her salon. She stopped at the bench. She didn't put the items down and walk away. Instead, she sat on the very far end of the bench. She took out the new brush and a single black hair tie. She placed them on her lap and just looked at her hands. The city noise continued. A delivery drone whirred overhead. Minutes passed. Una didn't move. She just waited, listening to the steady rush of steam from the pipe. Then, softly, she heard the scrape of a plastic crate. Slow, shuffling footsteps on the asphalt. Una kept her eyes down. She saw first the ragged hem of 2 large jeans, then scuffed sneakers. The Ilari girl, Myri, stood a few feet away, watching her. Her eyes were large, the color of dark amber, and full of a fear so deep it looked like exhaustion. She looked from Una's face to the brush in her hands and back again. Una gave a small, slow smile, the kind she used for nervous clients. She didn't speak. Finally, Myri moved. She didn't sit on the bench. Instead, she turned her back to Una and slowly sank to sit on the ground at Una's feet, right on the dirty pavement. She presented the impossible knot of her hair. It was an act of immense trust, and a clear, wordless request that Yuna's breath caught. She shifted on the bench, her stylist's instincts taking over. "This might take a while," she said softly, not sure if the girl understood. She started at the very bottom of the matted strands, using her fingers first, gently teasing apart the biggest knots. She worked with a patience she didn't know she had outside the salon. The hair was strange, cool and smooth between her fingers, like handling strands of light. Myri was a statue. She didn't relax. She just endured the touch, as if bracing for pain. Yuna began to hum. It was an old song her mother used to sing, a simple lullaby with no real words. She worked for 20 minutes, her fingers moving slowly from the ends upward, the new brush helping with the smaller tangles. Slowly, so slowly, the rigid line of Myri's shoulders began to soften. The terrified hold of her muscles started to unlock. By the time Yuna had brushed all the hair into a smooth, shimmering curtain down the girl's back, Myri was leaning back, just slightly, into the touch. Yuna divided the hair into 3 sections and began to weave a simple, basic braid. Felt familiar. It felt like healing a tiny piece of the world. When she tied the end with the black band, she gave the braid a gentle pat. All done. Myri lifted a hand, her fingers delicate and long. She touched the neat braid hanging over her shoulder. She traced its shape. Then she turned her head, looking up at Yuna. A single tear broke free, cutting a clean track through the dust on her cheek. Her voice was a whisper, hoarse and accented, but the Korean word was clear. "Thank you." The bench by the steam pipe became their place. The next evening, Yuna wasn't sure if Myri would be there, but she was. She sat on the ground in the same spot, her back to the bench. The braid from yesterday was still in place, a little messy from sleep, but holding. Yuna sat down and, without a word, began to gently undo it. Myri's hair was softer today, less tangled. Yuna brushed it out, the strands shimmering faintly like starlight on dark water. "My name is Yuna," she said as she worked. The girl was silent for so long Yuna thought she wouldn't answer. "Myri?" the girl finally whispered, the word almost lost in the hiss of the pipe. "That's a pretty name," Yuna said. It was a Korean name. It meant future. She wondered who had given it to her. She started a new braid, a French braid this time, which she knew would hold better. "Do you have a place to sleep, Myri?" No answer. The girl's shoulders stiffened again. Yuna changed the subject. "I work in a hair salon, over on 7th Street. I see a lot of hair, but yours is very special." This got a small, almost imperceptible nod. The braiding became their daily ritual. Yuna's old canvas bag turned into a care package. She brought things: a thermos of simple broth one cold night, a soft woolen beanie the next. She brought unscented lotion because she saw the skin on Myri's arms was dry and cracked. At first, Myri would just accept them with a slow bow of her head. But slowly, she began to offer things in return. A smooth, pretty pebble she found. A piece of clean, twisted wire she had shaped into a tiny, looping knot point one evening. As Yuna was finishing a double braid, Myri spoke unprompted. Her voice was low, her words careful. "The big places with the bright lights and the noise, they are loud and cold." She meant the main city squares, Yuna realized. The transit hubs? "I don't like those places much either," Yuna admitted, tying off the braid. "Too many people in a hurry." "Another night," Myri said. "People look, their eyes slide. They do not see." She wasn't just talking about being ignored. She meant something deeper, about being invisible. "I see you," Yuna said simply, and Myri went very still. Yuna started to talk, too. She told Myri about her boring day at the salon, about a difficult customer who wanted a haircut impossible to achieve. She mentioned her friend Jean. "He thinks I'm wasting my time," Yuna said, not specifying with what. "He says the city is dangerous, and you can't trust strangers." Myri listened, her head tilted. One afternoon, Yuna met Jean for coffee before her shift. He was a network engineer, practical and grounded. "You look tired," he said. "I'm fine. You're still going to that alley, aren't you?" Jin's face was concerned. Yuna, you have a good heart. But you don't know anything about that Ilari. The news is full of it. The tensions. That whole mess with their missing royal family. She's just a girl, Jin. She's scared and alone. That's the point, Jin said, leaning forward. Why is she alone? Where is her family? Their politics, it's not like ours. It's messy. You could be getting in the middle of something. Yuna stirred her coffee. She thought of Myri's careful hands accepting a thermos, her quiet tears that first night. She's not politics. She's a person who needs a braid. Jin sighed, a sound of fond frustration. Just be careful. Please. Yuna was careful, but she also couldn't stop. The braiding was no longer just an act of kindness. It was an anchor. For both of them. For Myri, it was a moment of safety. A guaranteed human touch that asked for nothing. For Yuna, it was a quiet rebellion against the city's coldness. A way to mend a tiny tear in the world. It filled a space in her that had been empty since her sister died. One rainy Thursday. Myri was shaking when Yuna arrived. Her braid from the day before was frayed and wild. She hadn't just slept in it. She had been through something. What's wrong? Yuna asked, her voice soft. Myri just shook her head, her eyes darting toward the alley's entrance. Yuna didn't press. She sat down and started brushing. The rhythm of the brush, the act of dividing and weaving, slowly calmed the girl's tremors. Yuna hummed the old lullaby. When the braid was done, Myri spoke, her voice thick. The stars are wrong here. They are faint. I cannot find my way by them. It was such a strange, sad thing to say. Yuna looked up at the smoggy, light-polluted sky, where no stars were visible at all. She understood then, in her gut, that Myri was not just homeless. She was profoundly, utterly lost. She was from somewhere else entirely, in every sense. I get lost too, sometimes, Yuna said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, foil-wrapped pastry. Here, this is sweet. It might help. Myri took it, her long fingers brushing Yuna's. For the first time, she held the contact for a second. Her amber eyes met Yuna's. In them, Yuna didn't see a refugee or a political problem or a princess. She saw a young girl, far from home, whose only consistent comfort was a simple braid done on a dirty bench. And in that moment, Yuna knew Jin's warnings didn't matter. This was her choice. She would keep coming, for as long as Myri was there. The bench and the steam pipe became a fixed point in Yuna's world. No matter how tired she was after a long day of cutting and styling, she walked to the alley. Her old canvas bag was always heavier now. She kept a small stash of things for Myri. Non-perishable food, water packets, travel-sized toiletries she took from the salon. Myri was always there, waiting. She never asked for anything. She would simply sit on the ground with her back to the bench, and Yuna would begin. Some days they didn't speak at all. Yuna would just hum her lullaby, and the only sounds were the brush moving through hair and the constant hiss from the pipe. The silence was comfortable, not empty. Other days, Myri would offer small pieces of herself. They were like fragments of a broken vase, sharp and beautiful. At the loud places, she said one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. The ones that move under the ground. The trains. People's eyes. They slide over you. They see the dirt. They do not see you. Yuna understood. She was describing the subway. And she was describing a feeling deeper than homelessness. It was a feeling of being erased. I see you, Yuna said, as she tied off a neat braid. Myri's hand came up and touched the end of the braid. A gesture she always made, as if confirming it was real in return. Yuna shared pieces of her own life. She talked about her salon, about Mrs. Cho who came every week for the same set and still wasn't happy, about the young girl who got her first haircut and cried. She mentioned Jean. My friend Jean thinks I am being naive, Yuna said, carefully working a small knot free. He watches the news. He says things with the Ilari are unstable, that there is some big political problem, a missing person. Myri went very still. Yuna felt the muscles in her back tighten under her hands. What does he say about the missing person? Myri's voice was tight. Not much, Yuna said, keeping her tone light. She didn't want to scare her. Just that it's important. I don't really follow the news. It's always bad. Myri relaxed just a little. Not all news is bad, she murmured as the weeks passed. A subtle change came over Myri. The hollows in her cheeks became less pronounced. Her hair, with daily care, began to hold its health. It shimmered more strongly, catching the alley's dim light in flashes of silver and deep blue. The dirty clothes couldn't hide the fact that she was growing stronger. Yuna brought her a proper hair clip one day, a simple blue one. The next evening, Myri's braid was fastened with it. She had kept it clean. This small act of care felt like a victory point one rainy afternoon. Yuna met Jean for lunch at a small soup shop near his work. He looked at her closely. "You look different," he said. "I'm just the same." "No," Jean insisted, stirring his soup. "You look less tired, but also worried. It's about the girl, isn't it? The Alari." Yuna didn't deny it. "She has a name. It's Myri." Jean put his spoon down. "Yuna, listen to me. I checked the bulletins. The missing Alari. It's not just some refugee. It's their princess. The whole treaty between their people and Earth is stuck because of it. There are security teams everywhere. If she's involved in anything..." "She's a kid living in an alley, Jean," Yuna said, her voice harder than she intended. "She's not involved in politics. She's trying to find her next meal and stay warm." "That's exactly my point." Jean kept his voice low, leaning in. "Why is she alone? Why isn't she with her own people? Something isn't right. You could be caught in the middle of something dangerous." Yuna thought of Myri's careful hands accepting a steamed bun, her silent tears that first night. She thought of the way she flinched at sudden noises. That wasn't the behavior of a political operative. It was the behavior of someone who was terrified. "She's not dangerous," Yuna said firmly. "She's scared, and she needs someone to be kind. That's all." Jean sighed, a long, frustrated sound. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. "I know you. You have the biggest heart of anyone I know. Just, please be careful. For me, if something feels wrong, you walk away. Promise me." Yuna looked at his worried face. He was her friend. He cared. She squeezed his hand. "I promise I'll be careful." But that evening, when she saw Myri huddled on her crate, her face lighting up with a shy, relieved smile at the sight of Yuna, the promise felt complicated. Walking away wasn't an option anymore. Myri wasn't a project. She was a person Yuna knew, a person who trusted her to show up with a brush and a quiet moment of peace. The braiding was no longer just charity. It had become a shared space. For Myri, it was the only safe touch in her world. For Yuna, it was a silent rebellion against the cold, busy city. It filled a quiet space in her that had been empty since her sister died. It was a simple human act. And in that alley, with the steam and the city noise around them, it felt more important than any news bulletin or political treaty. Felt real. The news was everywhere. On screens in shop windows, on the radio in the salon, on Jin's tablet. The missing Ilari princess was no longer a quiet, diplomatic worry. It was a crisis. Newsreaders talked about fragile treaty negotiations and rising instability. A reward for information was announced. It was a staggering number. Yuna watched it on her small kitchen TV, a knot of cold dread forming in her stomach. The report showed old, blurry images of the Ilari royal family. The princess was just a silhouette, a figure in elegant robes with gleaming hair. They didn't show her face clearly. They said her name was something formal and flowing. It didn't sound like Myri. Yuna tried to convince herself it was a coincidence. There must be many lost Ilari girls. But the city changed. The air felt tighter. At work, clients whispered about it. "They say she might be on Earth," one woman said, while Yuna trimmed her bangs. "Can you imagine? It's like a holodrama." Yuna just nodded, her scissors moving on autopilot on her walk home. She saw them. New people. A stern-faced human man in a plain coat, showing a digital badge to a noodle shop owner. Detective Day. He had sharp eyes that scanned the street like he was looking for a lost coin in the dirt. Further down, near the entrance to her alley, were two tall Alari. They wore rough human clothes, but they stood too straight, their gaze moving with a military precision that didn't match their ragged appearance. They were not homeless. They were hunting. One of them, a man with a severe face and eyes like chips of obsidian, seemed to feel her stare. His head turned. Yuna quickly looked down and walked past, her heart hammering against her ribs. For 2 days, the bench by the steam pipe was empty. The overturned crate was gone. Myri had vanished. Yuna came each evening, sat for 20 minutes in the growing dark, and left with the food and supplies heavy in her bag. The fear was a physical thing, a sharp rock in her throat. Had they found her? Had she run? Was she hurt? The third evening, as Yuna turned to leave, a small sound came from the deep shadow behind the recycling depot. A soft scrape. Myri emerged. She looked worse than the first day Yuna had seen her. Her clothes were torn. A fresh, thin cut marked her cheek. Her eyes held a terror so raw it made Yuna's breath catch. She didn't sit. She staggered to the bench and just stood there, shaking. Myri, what happened? Are you hurt? Yuna reached out, but Myri flinched back. The bad stars, Myri whispered, her voice cracked and dry. They are here. The ones who look but do not see. They have cold eyes. She was talking about the Alari men, Yuna realized. The ones pretending to be homeless. It's okay, you're safe right now, Yuna said, but the words felt weak. Myri shook her head violently.
No.
No safe. They want to take me back to the dark. The quiet, endless dark. Her hands came up, gripping her own arms so tight her knuckles turned pale. Not the cage. Not again. The word cage hung in the damp air. This wasn't just about being found. This was about being taken prisoner. Yuna thought of the news, the treaty, the reward. She thought of the cold-eyed Alari man and the human detective. They weren't rescuers. To Myri, they were hunters. A fierce, protective instinct, sharper than any fear, rose in Yuna. This was no longer just about braiding hair. This child was in danger. You can't stay here, Yuna said, her voice low and urgent. They know this place. Myri just stared, paralyzed by fear. Come with me. Yuna said it before she could think it through. To my home. The small, but it's warm. And the door locks. Myri's amber eyes widened. Leaving the alley, her only known shelter, was a terrifying idea. But staying was worse. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Yuna acted quickly. She took the large scarf from her own bag and gently wrapped it around Myri's head, covering the distinctive shimmer of her hair. Keep your head down. Walk close to me. They left the alley together. Yuna walked at a normal pace, but every nerve was screaming. She expected a hand on her shoulder at any moment. She saw Detective Day halfway down the block. Talking into his comm, she steered Myri across the street, into the crowd coming out of the transit station. The two tall Alari were at the corner, scanning faces. Yuna put her arm around Myri's shoulders, pulling her close, making them look like two friends hurrying home. The walk to her apartment building felt like miles. Every stranger was a threat. Finally, they reached the worn-out door of her building. She got Myri inside, up the stairs and into her apartment. The door clicked shut. Yuna locked it, then slid the old, rusty deadbolt she never used. Silence. Only the hum of her refrigerator. They stood in her small entryway. Myri was still shaking. She looked around at the modest room. The small couch, the shelf of books, the photo of Yuna and her sister on the wall. It was a human place. An alien place. It's okay, Yuna said again, and this time it felt a little more true. You're safe here. For now. Myri unwound the scarf. Her braid was completely ruined, her hair a wild cloud around her face. The cut on her cheek was clean, but it looked painful. The fear in her eyes was slowly being replaced by a stunned disbelief. She was inside. She was hidden. Yuna took a slow breath. The quiet of her apartment was broken. Her simple, lonely life was now filled with a dangerous secret. She looked at the terrified alien girl in her hallway and knew with absolute certainty that she could not and would not turn her away. The braiding had created a bond, and now that bond meant she had to fight, in her own quiet way, to keep Myri safe. The apartment was small, but to Myri, it seemed like a palace of strange wonders. The steady hum of the refrigerator was a new sound. The soft glow of the overhead light was a gentle sun. She stood in the middle of the living area, unmoving, as if afraid to touch anything. Yuna moved slowly, giving her space. "You can sit," she said, pointing to the couch. Myri stared at the cushioned furniture for a moment before carefully lowering herself onto the very edge. Her posture was still stiff, but her eyes never stopped moving, taking in every detail. The first priority was the cut. Yuna got her small first aid kit. She sat on the coffee table facing Myri. "This might sting a little," she warned before dabbing the clean cut with antiseptic. Myri didn't flinch. She just watched Yuna's face with those wide amber eyes, as if studying her intent. Yuna put a small bandage on it. There. All better. Next was the hair. It was a wild, tangled mess again. Yuna got her brush and sat beside her on the couch. Myri immediately turned, presenting her back. The ritual, even in this new place, was a comfort. Yuna began the slow work of brushing. The familiar rhythm seemed to finally let Myri breathe. Her shoulders sank, just a little. "Do you like soup?" Yuna asked. Myri gave a small nod. Yuna heated some simple vegetable broth on her stove. She placed the bowl on the coffee table with a spoon. Myri looked at the spoon, then carefully picked up the bowl with both hands and brought it to her lips to sip. Yuna didn't correct her. She just smiled. "It's hot, careful." That night, Yuna gave Myri a set of her own softest pajamas. They were too short in the arms and legs, but Myri held the fabric like it was precious silk. Yuna made a bed for her on the couch with extra blankets and a pillow. "This is for you. You can sleep here." Myri looked from the makeshift bed to Yuna, her expression unreadable. "You are not giving me to the cold-eyed ones?" The question was so direct it hurt. "No," Yuna said firmly. "You are my guest, as long as you need to be." The braiding continued, but now it was different. It was in the soft light of the living room, with the city sounds muffled by windows. Myri began to talk more. She pointed to Yuna's small potted plant. "It is green and still. It is good." She touched the photo of Yuna's sister. "She has your smile." One evening, Myri watched as Yuna tried to fix a loose button on a shirt. She held out her hand. "May I?" Yuna handed her the needle and thread. Myri's long, delicate fingers worked with impossible speed and precision. The stitch she made was tiny and perfect, stronger than anything Yuna could do. She saw a flash of something in Myri's eyes, not just skill but memory. A memory of a different life, where such fine work was normal. "Where did you learn that?" Yuna asked softly. The light in Myri's eyes dimmed. She handed back the shirt. Another time, a before time. As days passed, a change came over Myri. The constant terror in her eyes faded, replaced by a watchful calm. With regular food and safety, her health improved. Her hair, brushed and braided daily, regained its full, breathtaking shimmer. It glowed like spun moonlight in the dim apartment. The patterns on her skin, the luminous freckles, began to pulse with a soft, gentle light. She was beautiful in an unearthly way. She looked less like a homeless girl and more like something else, something important. Yuna saw the change. It was hard to miss. A deep unease grew alongside her protective feelings. This was no ordinary refugee. The way Myri carried herself, the careful grace of her movements, the occasional, almost automatic formality in her speech. It all pointed to a truth Yuna was afraid to name. One afternoon, the door buzzer screamed through the apartment. Myri, who was learning a card game at the table, froze. Her eyes went wide with the old, raw fear. The light on her skin flickered and went dull. Yuna put a finger to her lips. She walked to the door and looked through the peephole. A man in a neat coat stood there. It was the detective from the street, Day. His face was all sharp angles and serious lines. Yuna's heart slammed against her ribs. She took a deep breath, smoothed her shirt, and opened the door just a crack, the chain lock still in place. "Can I help you?" Detective Day held up his badge. "Yuna Park?"
I'm Detective Kim.
"I'm asking around the neighborhood about a missing person. An Alari juvenile. She was seen frequenting the alley near the recycling depot. You walk that way home from work?" "Correct." Yuna kept her face neutral, a skill she used with rude clients.
Ido.
"I've seen some people there, yes. Have you seen a young Alari female, alone with distinctive hair? Possibly in distress." Yuna looked him right in the eye. Inside, her stomach was twisting. Behind her, she knew Myri was holding her breath, hiding just out of sight in the hallway. This man represented authority. He represented the right thing to do. But he also represented the cold eyes Myri feared. He represented a cage. "I see a lot of people," Yuna said, her voice steady. "But no, I haven't seen a girl like that recently. Not for a week or more." "Is she in trouble?" "Her family is very worried," Day said, his eyes scanning her face, looking for a tell. "It's a matter of some importance. Interstellar importance." "That sounds serious," Yuna said, injecting sympathy into her tone. "I'm sorry I can't help. I'll keep an eye out, though." Detective Day held her gaze for a second longer, then gave a short nod. "Thank you for your time. If you do see anything, the contact information is on the bulletins." He handed a small card through the crack in the door. Yuna took it. "I will. Good luck, Detective." She closed the door. She listened to his footsteps fade down the hall. Only then did she slide the chain off and lock the door again, leaning her forehead against the cool wood. Her hands were trembling. She turned. Myri was standing there, pressed against the wall, tears streaming silently down her face. Not from fear this time, but from a profound, overwhelming gratitude. Yuna had looked directly at authority and lied. For her. Yuna walked over and, without a word, gently guided Myri back to the couch. She picked up the brush. The familiar action was a comfort to them both. As she began to braid, her hands finally steadying, she understood the line was now permanently crossed. She was not just a bystander anymore. She was hiding a secret, and she would protect the frightened girl she had found, no matter who or what she really was. The apartment settled into a new, fragile routine. Yuna went to work, her mind always half at home. She bought more food, simple things that were easy to eat. Myri stayed inside, a silent ghost in the small rooms. She spent hours at the window, watching the city with a quiet intensity. She kept the place spotless, cleaning surfaces Yuna hadn't noticed were dirty, folding blankets into perfect squares. The braiding was the anchor. Each evening, Yuna would sit on the couch and Myri would sit on the floor in front of her. The brush would move through the luminous hair, and for a while the outside world didn't exist. Yuna taught Myri a simple Korean braid. Myri, in turn, guided Yuna's hands to create an intricate Alari plait, a pattern of loops and weaves that felt like writing a secret language in hair. "You are a fast learner," Myri said one evening, her voice soft. She was watching their reflection in the dark window. Yuna's human hands were finishing the complex braid Myri had shown her. "So are you," Yuna replied, tying it off. She looked at their reflection too. The contrast was striking. Her own plain features, her simple clothes, and Myri, with her glowing skin and royal-looking braid, like a fallen star sitting on her carpet. The truth was a weight in the room, heavier every day. Jean came over 2 days later. He brought takeout, a peace offering. Yuna hadn't told him Myri was there. She met him at the door, blocking the view inside. "Hey, I come bearing noodles," he said, smiling. His smile faded when he saw her tense face. "You okay? You look stressed." "I'm fine, just tired," Yuna said, taking the bag. "Actually, now's not a great time for a visit. I have a migraine." Jin's eyes narrowed. He was her oldest friend. He knew when she was lying. His gaze drifted past her shoulder into the apartment. "Yuna, what's going on?" It was then that Myri, perhaps curious about the voices, stepped into view from the hallway. She was wearing Yuna's pajamas, her extraordinary hair in that intricate Ilari braid. The soft light from her skin was unmistakable in the dim hall. Jin's mouth fell open. He looked from Myri to Yuna, understanding dawning in his eyes, followed by alarm. You have got to be kidding me. Jean, it's not. He pushed past her gently into the apartment, closing the door behind him. He stared at Myri, who stared back, frozen. Yuna, he said, his voice low and urgent. Do you have any idea who this is? This isn't just a stray. This is the story on every news feed. She's a scared girl, Yuna said, moving to stand slightly in front of Myri. She's a political time bomb. Jean ran a hand through his hair. He pulled out his tablet, fingers flying. The reward? The treaty. Yuna, you can't hide this. You could be arrested. They could deport you. Myri flinched at the word deport. Jean pulled up a file. It was the security footage from his repair work. He showed it to Yuna. On the screen, clear despite the alley's gloom, were two tall Ilari men in rough clothes. They were cornering a smaller figure, Myri. The taller one, a man with a severe face, bowed his head slightly. His lips moved. Jean had enhanced the audio. A gruff, translated subtitle appeared. Highness, you must come with us. It is not safe here. On the screen, Myri shook her head violently, ducked under the man's arm, and fled. Yuna's blood ran cold. Highness. Jean paused the video. They weren't trying to hurt her. They were trying to protect her. Her own guards. And she ran from them. He looked at Myri. Why? Why would you run from your own people? Myri's face had gone pale, her skin's light guttering like a dying candle. She looked at Yuna, her eyes pleading. They are not my people. Not like you think. They would take me back to the gilded dark. To the silence. To be a symbol. Not a person. Her words were a desperate whisper. It is a cage of light and expectation. I could not breathe. Yuna understood then. It wasn't kidnappers she feared. It was her own crown, her own destiny. She had run from a life of duty to find a moment of real life. But the danger was real. Jean pointed at the frozen image of the severe Ilari man. These guys are still out there. And the human police are crawling everywhere. They will find this building. It's only a matter of time. As if summoned by his words, a new sound came from the street below, the distinct, low hum of an official ground car pulling to a stop. Yuna rushed to the window, peeking through the blinds. Detective Day was getting out of the car, looking up at the building. He was checking a small scanner in his hand. He's here. Yuna breathed. Jean cursed softly. Myri looked like she might shatter. Yuna turned from the window. Her heart was breaking, but her mind was clear. The dream was over. She could not protect Myri from this world. She walked to Myri and took her hands. They were cold. Myri, you have to go to them, to your guards. They can keep you safe in a way I can't. They can take you home. Tears spilled from Myri's eyes, but she didn't sob. She looked at Yuna with a sorrow so deep it seemed ancient. You do not understand. That place, it is not home. She squeezed Yuna's hands. This was home. These days with you, the braids, the quiet. You saw me, not a princess, just Myri. She let go of Yuna's hands and, in a move that shocked both Yuna and Jean, she wrapped her arms around Yuna in a tight, desperate hug. You are my people, she whispered into Yuna's shoulder, her voice thick. Outside, a buzzer sounded. Not Yuna's apartment, someone else's. Detective Day was working his way up. The three of them stood frozen in the middle of the room, the truth laid bare, the walls closing in. The choice was no longer theirs to make. The world had found them. The buzzer echoed up the stairwell. They could hear Detective Day's muffled voice at a neighbor's door down the hall. Time, which had stretched so peacefully during the braiding, was now snapping tight. Jean moved first. He went to the window again. The other ones are here too, he said, his voice tense. Down on the street, the two tall Ilari men had appeared. The severe-faced one, Teho, stood like a statue, his eyes fixed on the building's entrance. He had known. He had followed the detective. Myri pulled back from the hug. The tears were still on her cheeks, but something in her had shifted. The fear was burned away, replaced by a calm, deep resolve. The slouch she had carried in the alley was gone. Her shoulders were straight, her chin level. She looked at Yuna, not as a scared girl, but as someone who had made a decision. "I will not let them trouble you," Myri said. Her voice was different, clearer. It carried a note of authority Yuna had never heard before. "Myri, no, wait." Yuna started, but Myri was already walking to the apartment door. "You must trust me," Myri said, and her hand reached for the lock. Yuna and Jean could only watch, frozen. Myri unlocked the door and opened it just as Detective Day was raising his hand to buzz. He looked startled. His sharp eyes took in the scene. The open door, the glowing Alari girl, the two humans behind her in the apartment. "Can I help you?" Myri asked. Her Korean was perfect, formal. Detective Day recovered quickly, flashing his badge. "I'm looking for a missing person, an Alari juvenile. I need to ask the occupant, Yuna Park, some questions." "I am the occupant you seek," Myri said, her voice cool. "And I am not a juvenile by the laws of my people. You may speak with me." From the stairs came the sound of heavy, swift footsteps. Taeho and his guard appeared in the hallway. They moved with a silent, predatory grace. Detective Day instinctively put a hand near his weapon. The hallway became very crowded. Very tense, Taeho ignored the detective. His obsidian eyes were only for Myri. He dropped to one knee right there on the worn hallway carpet, his head bowed. "My princess," he said, his voice a rough gravel of relief and anguish. "The concordance has been in darkness. We have failed you, princess." The word hung in the air, solid and real. Detective Day's eyes widened. He looked from the kneeling guard to Myri, finally understanding the magnitude of what was before him. Myri did not look at Taeho. She kept her gaze on Detective Day. "This woman, Yuna Park, is under my personal protection," she said, each word precise. "She is a citizen of Earth who acted with compassion when I was in need. She gave me sanctuary when my own light had failed. She asked for nothing. She is to be honored, not questioned." She then turned her head slowly to Taeho. "You will stand, Captain, and you will listen. I fled not from danger, but from a life that felt like a slow silence. This human, with her simple kindness, showed me what peace could feel like. Because of her, I now understand my duty. Because of her, I choose to return." Taeho rose, his face unreadable. He gave a sharp, respectful nod to Yuna. The meaning was clear. "Thank you." Detective Day, a professional caught in an interstellar incident, cleared his throat. "Your Highness, my government is relieved at your safety. But there are procedures. The reward for your location?" "The reward," Myri interrupted, "will be donated, in Yuna Park's name, to a fund for homeless youth in this sector. This is my wish. You will make it happen." It was not a request. Day, out of his depth, simply nodded. "Yes, of course." The formalities were overwhelming. The hallway was full of words like treaty and debriefing and diplomatic transport. Through it all, Myri stood like a calm center. But when the moment came to leave, her regal composure wavered. She looked past the men into the apartment at Yuna. The officials and guards understood. They moved back, giving space. Myri stepped back into the apartment. She was a princess again, but her eyes were the eyes of the girl from the bench. "One more?" she asked, her voice small. Yuna, her own eyes swimming with tears, could only nod. She pointed to the couch. Myri sat on the floor in her usual spot. The city officials, the royal guard, Detective Day, and Jean all waited in the hallway, watching through the open door in the quiet of the living room. Yuna picked up her brush. She gently undid the complex Alari braid. She brushed out the princess's shining hair one last time. Then, with careful, loving hands, she wove a simple, perfect three-strand braid, just like the very first one. It was not a royal style. It was a sister's braid. A friend's braid. When she tied it off, she placed her hands on Myri's shoulders. "Be brave," she whispered. Myri reached up and covered Yuna's hand with her own. "Be happy," she whispered back. Then Myri stood. She did not look back. She walked into the hallway, where her guards fell in step behind her. Detective Day led the way. The group moved down the stairs and were gone. The apartment was silent. The silence was huge. Jean finally closed the door. He looked at Yuna, who was still standing, staring at her empty hands. "You okay?" he asked softly. Yuna didn't answer right away. She walked to the window. Down on the street, a sleek, official vehicle was pulling away. She saw a pale hand press against the darkened window for just a second before the car turned the corner and vanished. She touched the cool glass. The city went on unaware. No explosions, no grand battles. Just a braid, done daily, that had quietly changed the course of two worlds. The human factor wasn't about strength. It was about seeing a person in the shadows and offering a brush, a braid, and a bench to sit on. It was about building a bridge of simple kindness, strong enough for a princess to walk back home. "I will be," Yuna said finally. And for the first time in a long time, she believed it.